conclusions because they are taught to do so in our culture. And that started with the freak shows, the early American freak show, where you had, this part man, part woman, standing in highly sexualized manners, and it was all very, very sexual. And that, those images carried forward through vaudeville and through movies and through up until Jerry Springer and all of that. And so I think
Wait a minute. Do you think they were there in the 50s and 60s and 70s? I don't think so much.
Oh, I absolutely do. I think that when people heard about Christine Jorgensen, I think that they probably did think that it was about sex, that she did it for sexual reasons.
Oh, no, I don't think so at all.
No? Okay. Can you talk about your perspective?
When Christine Jorgensen hit the scene, that was what, 1952? Is that the right date?
It was in the early 50s. Excuse me.
The world, and I'm speaking of the United States, let's look at it this way. The television had only been around for literally about 4 years at that point in time. So what you had was primarily radio, and even in the biggest cities in 1952, there were one, maybe two television stations. So you had radio, and you had the print media, the magazines, Lifetime and whatever. And all of a sudden, this was like, wow, look at this.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, to a degree.
It wasn't a freak show.
Well, to a degree.
This was science, post-World War II science, suddenly making some advances, and people were absolutely astounded. It was not a freak show.
Well, to a degree, I can agree, but before that, there were big headlines where Heidi Jo Star was doing her thing, and Rebecca and Cotzenelle. God, you think about the things that Cotzenelle did. It was all highly, highly sexual. Bambi and... None of that was even known to the main mass of the people in this country across the entire land. Okay, Well,
it just was not on the radar scope. When you're talking about St. Louis, Chicago, Nashville, Little Rock, Dallas, places like that, they had no idea any of that was going on. You're talking about radio days there. You're talking about days when people were just totally unaware of that. And you can look back at it and say, oh, look, here was some news from France. I'm sorry, that news didn't reach Charlotte, North Carolina. It didn't reach Minneapolis. It just wasn't there. It wasn't on the radar scope.
Well, I mean, I would agree that it certainly wasn't to the degree that Christine Jorgensen brought it there. However,
when did you first become aware of Christine Jorgensen?
I just want to say, it seems like I've always been aware of Christine Jorgensen. I must have heard about Christine, gosh, at a very young age, and I always.
I don't want to get too personal, but when were you born? What year? Pick a decade, 60s, 70s, what?
I'm going to decline that question.
Okay, I'm going to answer for you from my standpoint. I was born in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
Christine Jorgensen had her surgery in 1952, I think. I'm correct on that. Maybe somebody that's typing can correct me if it was 53 or 54, but I think it was 52. Okay, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Okay, I did not hear about Christine Jorgensen in the 50s when she not hear about her in the 60s until very late in that decade. You know why? Because it simply wasn't covered in a daily newspaper, and it wasn't covered on the radio stations, and it wasn't covered on television. Okay, the first time I became really aware of Christine was probably in the late 60s when Renee Richards was playing the tennis circuit. And it was like, wow, what is this?
Right.
And all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute. You mean there's a few other people in the entire world that are like what I've been going through? You mean there's really somebody else out there? The point I'm trying to make is that unless you were in New York City or LA, you did not see any of this stuff. There was no internet. You had one or two TV channels in the 50s if you were lucky. And what was covered on there was tightly controlled. You just didn't see it. What was in your local library was tightly controlled. What was in the local newspaper? We can sit here in the internet age and say, oh wow, we can see across the world with all of these things. We can follow the riots in Jordan, for God's sakes. But in terms of transsexuality, the 50s and the 60s were a very lonely, dark ages time. You were by yourself. It's that simple.
Yeah, I agree that it was like that. I do know that trans stories made it out of the major metropolitan areas from time to time because we have those stories in the archive. Men's magazines, especially men's magazines, covered Kotzenel quite a bit because she was
And what was the distribution on those magazines? In what cities? How broad? You're talking about minuscule distribution compared to what's available today and things like the internet.
Oh, certainly. Whenever you compare it to that, absolutely, sure. But I'm saying that there wasn't there.
Would you like to know the easiest way to get killed in Kentucky in the 50s?
Being viewed as being some sort of gay?
Not being viewed as being a little bit different in some way.
Right.
Okay, gay doesn't begin to cover the spectrum.
Just out of curiosity, not to completely sidetrack you, but why did you pick Kentucky? Did you grow up in Kentucky?
I was born in Kentucky.
I spent a lot of time in Murray, Kentucky.
You what?
I spent a lot of time in Murray, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, that's a strange place.
Anyway, so, okay, go ahead.
I watch people like Yvonne, what's her name, Riley. I never can remember her middle. Where did she get a concatenated last name from, anyway?
I don't know.
But this is a person with a good heart and soul that had an objective to help other people. Okay, she forgot that in the process of doing that, she might be screwing another sector. And the sector that she was screwing were the people that were doing just fine. They had gone through all the heavy BS they had to straighten out their lives, to get the hormones, to get the surgery, to get the documentation changed, to blend in with society. And they were doing just fine. They did not need